Halito, Sahachafayak Kristin Gentry, Choctaw Sia. Hello, my name is Kristin Gentry and I'm Choctaw. I am the Emerging Curator for Momentum this year.
Pablo Barrera. Welcome everybody, my name is Pablo Barrera and it is my distinct honor to be the guest curator of Momentum 2021.
I really love Momentum as an exhibition. When I was under 30, I was able to be a Momentum artist for several years. And I love everything behind it, what it means for emerging artists. I know it definitely played an important part in my career as an artist, so I was really excited to be able to give that back to new artists coming up in our state right now.
Yeah, so in terms of the process for selecting the artists, I mean, it's always a challenge when you're looking at multiple artists and you're doing a survey exhibition, because you are pretty much at the mercy of the submissions. You're also, going to have to be a little subjective. You're going to have to just make decisions based upon personal preference. So what I did was I sort of took the stance that we're going to end up with an exhibition where you see these beautiful artworks on the wall, but it's simultaneously emblematic of the art practice of the artist itself, but it's also not necessarily the full range that the artist expresses.
We thought that was important to include all different types so that you could see what our emerging artists are creating today and how they're creating it through those mediums. And that was really important to look at their techniques and executing those.
So in some cases you will see some works that were picked because we really liked the direction that it was going for the particular artist and it really was a great execution, and we almost wanted to sort of highlight that so that the artist can hopefully look at their work on these walls and think again about how that's successful and maybe pursue that particular approach to their artwork and maybe continue to develop their style, because these are emerging artists.
I think it's a very highly emotional show, and so for me, with all my experience with Momentum, that's very different for what I've ever seen from Momentum before. It's very serious, and I think that's just what our culture is right now.
But it's not all just negative emotions. A lot of people were very joyful. There were some folks that were taking minutes to self-reflect. There's a lot of self-reflexivity, a lot of insightful moments where artists were just sort of displaying these beautiful visual moments that kind of portrayed these tiny, almost ephemeral instances in which they can just sort of find themselves through the silence and through this pressure. And I think that that's something that really showed through with a lot of the artwork. I think a lot of the pieces do toggle back and forth between the negative aspects of the pandemic and the struggles that have been in place, but on the other side, on the flip side, you can also see a lot of evidence of artists who are able to somehow harness themselves and harness their talents and then create this beautiful work that ends up having just a sort of underlying element of joy.
I think people are going to be taking deep breaths sometimes for this show. That's heavy, like an emotional release, which can also be very healing, as a shared experience for how hard everything is.
So we hope that we struck a balance with something that's visually arresting, but that's also very sort of insightful and also just intriguing. That makes people kind of think about the works a little differently, think about the subjects a little differently, and just sort of work and play with each other to where you have things that are maybe heavier in terms of the intellectual impetus for the works, and that are also just heavier with the hand in terms of the actual talent, that is sheer color and the joy of the visual material. And then there are some works that just stood out. There are some works that just had a perfect blend of both, and of course we had to have them, so that was the easiest part of the list. But overall, I think that they work well together. I think that they work strongly together, and I think that in conversation they really encapsulate what's happening within such an artistic rich community such as Oklahoma.
All three artists, as we were doing their studio visits, it was all virtual of course, and they just came with so much, you're talking about vulnerability, and their work quality was already phenomenal. As you view this show and view their work, you'll see just the techniques they all have, their way to express their ideas, and their stories that go with it are so much their own. And to be able to strongly express them visually sometimes is a hard translation to do. You will have these ideas, but how do I express that? So as you walk through and are immersed inside Andrea's pieces, you get to physically enter her art world and see that perspective. And how you view her artwork changes literally depending on where you're standing. And then the transparency of it, it's just, to me, phenomenal. So the space will be really great for that. And then with Amber's work, she works so much with like relearning her own language, keeping her language alive. Like language revitalization is so important. But specifically for Amber, she comes from multi-different tribes, and so she was able to work on how to incorporate more of her language, all three of them all at once, instead of just like individually. So I really found it interesting to see how she would take her ideas and then not just like not like figuratively like expand upon them, but her work for Momentum is going to be much larger than she's typically shown before.
Since it's my privilege to talk about Maria Morano's work, I think what I really enjoyed about it was something that I saw as a thread that connected all three artists, in that it's very personal. It's an extraordinarily personal work that has a presence, that reaches back into their own personal story, their own personal philosophies, their own outlooks on life, and is rendered in this beautiful, inviting, visual way. And it makes you sort of focus on your own personal connection. So even though it's very specific, and even though it's very culturally specific, it still has this resonance with all kinds of audiences, this idea of home, this idea of time, this idea of heritage, and this idea of like the different places that shape you and make you the person that you are. You know, we definitely wanted to pick artists that were skilled, you know, because there were some great ideas. There were some really phenomenal ideas, but it just didn't feel like the artists were quite ready to really kind of reveal that particular work based on their practice and based on their history. So we also had to pick artists that were going to be visually capable of producing and manifesting that particular vision that they proposed. And we really felt strongly that these artists had what it took to do so, but also to do it in a way that makes people want to resonate with the work itself and see themselves in the work, despite the fact that it's such a specific lens from each artist personally. Yeah, so the thing that we want people to walk away with, I think, when they come inside here is, obviously this is a snapshot of the contemporary art scene of Oklahoma, but you know, it's a very diverse, very complex snapshot. It deals with all these interesting tragedies, instances, and contexts that I think a lot of folks tend to be very uncomfortable with, but this is a strength of contemporary art.
So typically when people view a Momentum exhibition, may or may not be a DJ, this is a, like even the space itself as a formal gallery is even, to me, different from Momentum. Momentum, you know, typically is very unique spaces. So this exhibition will be viewed in two different traditional gallery spaces.
That's right.
And it won't be viewed in the masses. I think that will cause them to engage in the art, I think, in that reflective way, so that they will have more time to spend with each piece. Mm-hmm. I think the times in that sense will give people more of a chance to actually engage.